Viewer discretion is advised.
Okay. You are listening to Wine and Crime, the podcast where two friends chug whatever we've got in front of us, chat true crime, and unleash their worst Minnesotan accents.
Yeah.
You took a big old swig of your macho right when I was saying that. So
Listen,
well,
I experienced a homeownership trauma where you go to Home
Crisis.
Depot and they don't have the thing that said on the website that they had. And another hardware store also didn't have it. And so you left the house for no reason. So you go through the Caribou drive-thru and you get yourself a matcha and one of those mini egg and turkey bacon and cheese
a
sandwiches.
turkey bacon mini.
Yeah, bitch.
Those
that
are
shit
my
is so, they're
favorite.
so good. I usually
They're just
get that.
perfect little size.
It's the perfect little size. I'll get that, or I also really like the chicken chorizo breakfast burrito with scrambled eggs.
Ooh, oh yes, I have had that.
That fucker is good, and it
The egg
fills
soup-
you up.
The Gouda bacon egg souffle is also delicious.
Anyway, this episode not brought to you by Caribou, but it's not brought to you by Caribou. I'm brought to you by Caribou today.
Caribou's wide offering of just little microwavable pouch snacks that
Caribou
are
reaches
somehow
out and is
really
like,
good.
Could you not promote us, please?
We don't want to be associated
Hey,
with
thanks,
you.
but like, no thank you.
We have to pixelate out the branding on your cup.
We're not doing that. We don't have the budget for Blur. You kidding me? What is this?
For Blur?
We can't afford Blur. What the fuck are you talking about? Anyway, who are we?
I don't know. I'm Lucy.
I'm Amanda. Please join our Patreon. We can't afford Blur.
Sponsor our Blur. God knows we need it.
God knows. I am in like my fully orange
You look
outfit
like
today.
a traffic cone. Your headphones are orange.
Oh, it's like honestly, I think I'm slowly coming to realize that it's my favorite color.
Felon.
Orange and pink. Yeah.
Felon orange.
I love it. It's so cute. It's so cute.
Well, speaking of felons,
Seriously.
we have a pretty cool topic for you today. Today we are going to be discussing environmental crimes.
I wish there were more felonies for environmental crimes, but the actual like oversight, precedent in a legal sense, and consequences are quite low.
Well,
Tragically low.
we'll get to it.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to say the opposite, but on a different end of the environmentalism spectrum than what I think you are referring to.
Oh, yeah. I'm referring to like corporations being held accountable for their fucking damage, irreparable fucking damage to the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There's like no fucking legal consequence for that shit. Barely.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
Yeah. Well,
Welcome back to with Lucy and Anna.
I think it's really easy to get like super depressed and like hopeless, especially when we're talking about climate change and
Yeah.
the mess that is our environment and the writing on the wall.
The ticking time bomb.
Mm-hmm.
The inevitable death of our world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That said, I tried to kind of stay away from like super doomsday-y stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a lot of interesting information, and I was just texting Amanda about this before we started, but I was like, I need an extra 30 minutes because there is so fucking much to talk about that I started over here, and then an hour and a half later, I was still on the same subject, and I was like, but wait, I wanted to talk about like
This.
85 other things.
Yeah, so let's just be clear, as we always are. This is not the show for every detail of the climate crisis.
No, in no way is this a
Comprehensive.
cohesive,
Or cohesive.
coherent conversation about environmentalism. But we're
gonna
going to try
touch
to.
on important shit.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's a tapestry. It's a massive area.
I can't speak for what you have prepared for today, but
Neither can I.
I think I'm going to touch on some important shit. So I'm excited. I'm excited about this episode. You're going to be upset.
Oh, well, yeah.
And concerned.
Yeah.
But you'll be also enlightened somewhat to things that you might not know are issues. So that's kind of fun.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know, you know?
I don't know, you know?
I love it.
Well, Amanda, would you like to get us started on our wine crime pairing for environmental crimes?
Yeah, I wanted to take this opportunity to touch on some things that have to do with sustainable winemaking, which is like such a hot topic. It's sustainability is kind of a buzzword. Hot. So fucking hot. It's definitely like a buzzword that you'll see on a lot of winemakers' websites, on their labels. And a lot of that sustainability, which is very important, has to do with the actual farming practice, which again, that is an important aspect of sustainable winemaking. You'll see a lot of organic or farming methods that promote sustainability and environmental wellness. But the sustainability in winemaking actually goes pretty far beyond the farming process and things that I hadn't even really considered. And then I did some research on this and found out some interesting stuff. So the thing that contributes to, on average, 40% of a winemaker or producer's like carbon footprint or like environmental impact is not the farming practice of how the grapes are grown and even how the wine is produced. It has to do more with the bottles that it's put in, the packaging, and the freight. Because glass bottles are super heavy. And so a detail that you can look for when you're shopping for wines, and we'll kind of get to it, is like bottle weight. And the lighter the weight, the less impact on the environment because it's less heavy to ship, for example.
Like canned wines and boxed wines are helping that.
Yes.
Whoa, cool.
And the feature that I'm going to mention at the end of this segment today is a canned wine that it has a nice commitment to not only sustainable farming practices, but these more sustainable packaging, trying to go zero plastic, compostable packaging, but also just like the impact of the actual freight of getting the wine to where you purchase it is considerably reduced when you avoid glass bottles.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to share this article from International Wineries for Climate Action. This is a very cool organization that is a grassroots org that's working with wineries. You know, it's based out of the US, but all over the place to try and help them become more sustainable, not just on the farming side, but also on the packaging and shipping side. So this is called Bottled Up, Unpacking the Facts About Wine Bottles and Climate Change. So it says packaging is a significant source of emissions in the wine life cycle. From vine to table, the process of making wine is complex. Each step in the process can be a source of greenhouse gas emissions. And these are emissions we're tackling as part of our mission to decarbonize the wine sector by 2050. So that's like their overall goal. As it stands, packaging and transportation are some of the biggest culprits. Combined, they account for, as I mentioned before, over 40% of wineries' climate emissions. Emissions from packaging largely come from outsourced glass production. The heavier a bottle, the higher its environmental impact. And the less recycled glass in a bottle, the higher its environmental impact. So for the cans that I'm going to feature today, that's made out of recycled material and is an infinitely recyclable material. So you can continue to recycle those cans and then they can be made into other products. In absolute numbers, emissions from wine glass bottles are small relative to the total scope of emissions across all industries, but still in the context of wine, tackling emissions from glass is imperative to achieving net zero emissions in the sector. Transportation is important to mention because it's so closely linked to packaging. So wineries don't produce glass bottles themselves. Glass bottles have to travel to the bottling location. Bottles also travel to the market after filling. So that's two pathways of freight. The farther the bottle is shipped, the higher the climate emissions. Secondly, the weight of a bottle affects the cargo weight of a shipping or trucking container. Reducing bottle weight by even just a few grams has a huge impact in a container that transports thousands of bottles. Glass bottles can be one of the most sustainable packaging options if done correctly. Glass bottles are one of the most sustainable packaging options for the wine industry long term because they meet quality, aging, and durability standards, and they are recyclable. But that being said, the wine and glass industries must continue improving the sustainability of glass packaging. For example, the glass industry can use more recycled cullet in their bottles and switch their furnaces from fossil fuels to renewable electricity. So the actual process of melting down that glass to rework it, like fossil fuels are a huge problem with just energy source, period.
Yeah. Do you know about like corks versus caps too?
I don't know. I don't think that's mentioned in this
because I think that
article.
Cork is made out of wood, and you don't recycle cork. So I would think that the corking is also
moving away from things like cork, and even a lot of wine is packed and shipped in wooden crates. So that's obviously heavy, which increases the freight emissions, but
that's so
also
old-timey. Quit using wooden crates.
But it's still really popular. I know.
But it's just like,
it's
get
weird.
over
but
it.
then
That's
obviously
weird.
Deforestation is a problem if we have to source all the wood to make these packages and corks.
Yeah.
Wineries can design their bottles to reduce their weights and purchase glass from more sustainable suppliers. Some wine growing regions are exploring refillable bottles. This is like becoming a popular thing where you get your wine and you rinse out your bottle and then you can refill it with other wine. Many of the IWCA's members have pioneered innovations in this space, resulting in hundreds of tons of glass saved yearly. We're committed to accelerating similar transitions across the wine and glass industries. Consumers also play a part in wine sustainability. Consumers might be at the end of the wine supply chain, but ultimately this gives them an important role. Consumers can vote with their feet, purchasing wine from climate-conscious wineries and call upon their favorite wineries to mitigate their climate emissions. Consumers are ultimately also responsible for proper recycling of a wine bottle post-consumption. And obviously, recycling infrastructure is not accessible to everyone, even in the United States.
Fucked up.
It's wild. When I lived in upstate New York, we didn't have any kind of city or town recycling. You had to bring your bottles to a recycling station, your bottles and cans. They had them at Wegmans, the grocery store.
And how many people do that? Like any kind of recycling, not even the stuff you get nickels back for and whatever?
Well, this Wegmans incentive was effective because they would have these stations that were just like on the outside wall of the grocery store.
Yeah.
And you put in your cans, your bottles, whatever recyclable materials that they accept. And then it would spit out a receipt for you that you could either apply for like a higher amount toward your groceries or get cash back at checkout.
We have that in Iowa too, but it's like, it's not the best.
No. And even that, I mean, if you don't have a car, if, like, how are you able to haul your recyclables to a place like that? Like, it's
also very like dirty. Like no one wants to do that.
It's definitely tough.
That's also, people won't recycle like cardboard and things that you don't get any money back for.
Yeah, the lack of comprehensive recycling infrastructure in a lot of states and cities and towns is a challenge. Minnesota has pretty good recycling infrastructure, and there are employees that work for the city, at least in Minneapolis, that sort garbage as well to try and pull out recyclables that may have been mistakenly put into garbage cans. But obviously not every city budget covers that. So yeah, that's one way that we have to be more mindful of how we're recycling.
Also, places that have a lot of rental properties where the city doesn't go to pick up your recycling. Like they would have to have their own dumpster that the landlord pays for.
Yep.
That's the company that my friend that you also know started to address the issues with people living in apartments who want to recycle, and there isn't a good option in the city to do that.
Mm-mm. So it says, unfortunately, many consumers are unaware of the role that they can play. Many lack information or have misconceptions. I guess there was like a rumor in the wine industry that a heavier bottle means higher quality wine. That is not true. The thickness of the glass is not as much of a factor as the color of the glass in how light gets through that affects the quality or the flavor profile of the wine. So the thickness is not really an issue. They say, we're excited to see growing awareness about climate change and wine amongst consumers and media, including about the packaging issue. And there have even been articles out in like the Washington Post talking about it. So it says, through collective action, we can decarbonize the wine sector. As we approach the end of the year, we at IWCA raise a glass of sustainable wine to celebrate progress by our member wineries and others in driving climate action and awareness. So you can access kind of their like approved wineries at International Wineries for Climate Action. It's iwcawine.org. Very worth checking them out and seeing kind of what their partners are. You could support their work and yeah, learn a little bit more about their mission. But that's really something that I had not given a lot of thought to, is like the literal weight of the product is going to impact the climate because of the shipping.
Yeah.
So that
also makes it more expensive for you, the consumer.
It does. A cool wine program. It's called Sipwell Wine Co. And you can check them out at sipwellwine.com. They do canned wines, sustainably farmed with like I said, recyclable materials. They're on a mission to go completely zero plastic. But it's mostly recyclables in wines of all different kinds of varietals. So they use organic grapes. Each one is single serve. So you're also, I feel like it's lower waste because you're not like opening a bottle and then letting it go bad. You can just have these in your fridge.
That's my big issue. I'll have like a glass or two and then it just sits there and I like forget about it.
And you can get it actually delivered to your door and you can mix and match what's in the box. It's also a totally woman-owned company, which I think is super, super cool.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I would highly recommend checking them out. Some of the featured wines on their website include a sparkling white. It's called Tiny Victories Sparkling White. The branding is super cute too. Rocksteady Sparkling Rosé. The Go Better Chilled Red Wine. There is a Pinot Noir. It's called the High Point Pinot Noir. They really do have a lot of wines that would be appealing to a lot of different wine drinkers. Again, that sort of saving it for later, like these will keep in your fridge for a very long time. And because they're canned.
Unopened,
right. And because they're canned and not corked, even if you have like a corked that is unopened bottle of, say, white wine that's sitting in your fridge, after a while, that cork can degrade if you don't drink it fast enough, and then oxygen can get in, and that can oxidize and kind of ruin your wine before you even get a chance to open it. That's what we call a corked wine. If you open a fresh bottle of wine that has a cork in it, it kind of smells like vinegary and off. It's likely that there was some cork degradation and oxygen was able to access that. That doesn't happen with a can. So I just wanted to shout them out. Sipwell Wine Co. They have beautiful marketing, woman-owned business. They're committed to sustainability, and it's all canned. So you're not dealing with a lot of the carbon footprint issues that like larger scale glass bottle wineries are dealing with. So I thought that was kind of a cool concept.
I love it.
Yeah.
I like when companies are being proactive.
Are trying at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So great.
It's nice. It's nice. We're proud of you.
Well, I know you're drinking your iced matcha. You got anything else in there?
Oh, I'm high as a kite. That's why I can barely fucking read.
Fabulous. Well,
yeah.
I have.
Are you sipping on anything today?
I am. I got wine.
Yum.
It's a Kendall Jackson Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay, Jack.
I'm not going to say it's great, but it's something, and I haven't drank during an episode
in a minute. It's your time to shine, baby.
And it's after 4 p.m. I can justify this.
Yeah, you absolutely
It's not
can.
a noon recording.
No. Okay, welcome back. Also, I just want to mention, if you hear any strange sounds on my side of the recording, my husband...
got gas.
It's for once, it's not my gas, although I'm sure we owe John a raise for all the farts he's had to cut out of my side of the recording. But my husband and father-in-law are upstairs working on house projects because he came over to help with a light fixture that we ended up not being able to hang. So he's just like here helping with other stuff. They're refinishing the floor in the guest room, and it's just like so cute. So I can hear them fucking around up there, but there's nothing I can do about it. So everybody just
calm down.
Fuck off. All right, Lucy.
We should do in-law crimes.
Oh my God.
That'd be good.
That would be good. Make a note.
I'm adding it to the list. Okay, I'm adding it to my note.
Our in-laws would not make it onto the episode for being criminals. We both got pretty lucky in the in-law department for the most part.
We wouldn't be on that show, but my God, I've heard stories.
You hear horror stories about the in-laws. I saw this is totally unrelated, but I saw this thing on Reddit the other day where a woman was talking about how she's planning her wedding with her fiance.
Oh, God.
And
the
in-laws are like not contributing financially, but they have so many demands of what needs to be done with the wedding.
Is this like a am I the asshole post?
It's like an am I overreacting? Because she was posting about how I'm planning my wedding with my husband, but it's making me not want to marry him. And I actually commented because I was like, listen, if your husband is not willing to like back you up in boundary setting with his family, which is ultimately his responsibility. Like they're the family. I saw this written in there. I can't take credit for this, but it's like they're the family that he was born into, but you, the fiance, are the family he's choosing. And so like he has to honor that. And you know, he's just bending over to like everything that they want for the wedding. They wanted to do no kids, and then the family threw a fit, and you know, it's like a whole thing. And I was like, listen, if you can't get that figured out now, it's going to be prevalent throughout the marriage. When you have children, if you have any issues with the family, like this is just a tip of the iceberg before you're locked in and you're married. So like when you marry somebody, you kind of marry their family. And if that boundary setting isn't there, it can be really tricky. I am so fortunate that Bill and I really do not have to navigate those kinds of complex family dynamics, and we're not having kids, so like no one's banging down our door to hang out unless there's a house project to do. Because then Tom is calling me at 9 a.m. being like, when can I come over and help you? I'm
yes.
Like, yes. No, you mean come over and do it? Yes, please. Anytime. You're a kings.
I'll supervise. I'll be the drinks coordinator. I will get you ice water, lemonade, a cold beer, whatever you want.
Done. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting conversation and like worth noting.
I think in-law crimes would be really interesting.
Let's fucking do it.
All right. It's on my note.
The birth of a new episode. You heard it here first, folks.
This is how
no one's ever covered this before.
Well, speaking of new information, let's get it going on environmental crimes, shall we?
Oh, God. Yep.
According to the FBI, environmental crime is a broad category of offenses that include timber and wildlife trafficking. Apparently, timber trafficking is like a big fucking issue. And that is one of the things that I did not have time to get into. So at some point, we should do logging crimes.
I guess I never thought about timber. I know how much plant trafficking is a problem because plants that don't belong in certain ecosystems can like really fuck shit up, plants and animals and bugs and all that kind of shit. I never really thought about timber.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Which also can have all sorts of bugs in it and whatever. But particularly, okay, so I rewatched Fern Gully with June like a week ago.
My God. Deeply underrated animated movie from our childhood. Also, terrifying. The like smog monster.
So sad. The big caterpillar bulldozers.
Oh my God. It's like sitting in therapy. When did your trauma begin? Just pulls
Fern
up
Gully.
the Fern Gully VHS.
Mm-hmm. 4
Right
years
here,
old,
bitch.
Fern Gully.
My God.
So I'm proud to have instilled that in June.
Scare her.
Well before the age of 4.
Scare her straight.
But yeah, timber, logging.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to it at some point. Not today.
Oh, yeah. Well, I get to it a little bit.
Another thing that I thought about that I meant to research and did not. I'm just going to list the things I'm not going to tell you about.
Segment. This is amazing.
When Corey and I were living in China, we went to a province city called Kunming.
Mm-hmm.
And by like a week, we missed their, I don't know what they called it, but I think they were trying to sort of basically call it a wildlife expo.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where a bunch of dealers and traders go to buy like tiger penises.
Mm-hmm. Exotic
and, like,
animals and parts.
Mm-hmm. And I kind of wanted to go just because there was some crazy shit there.
Yeah.
But, and that's
maybe
sort
it's
of
best
like,
that you didn't go.
probably best that I didn't go.
Maybe that's a cultural experience that I think you can sit out.
Kunming, gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
Dali. Oh, Kunming. I think Kunming was the capital. Dali was the town that we went to. It's like in the mountains. It's like Western kind of China. Yeah. It's close to like Tibet, sort of.
Gorgeous. Yeah. Beautiful.
Gorgeous. But yeah, so that would be like wildlife trafficking and a bunch of other stuff. So they more offenses also include illegal fishing, illegal waste trade, pollution.
Poaching fall under that wildlife trafficking?
Definitely poaching,
okay.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Like ivory trade and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Also animal cruelty, such as dog fighting, cockfighting, animal torture.
Mm-hmm.
But not animal testing.
Yeah, funny how that's protected.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Each of these offenses is often associated with other crimes, including corruption, fraud, violent crimes. I will add trespassing.
Mm-hmm.
Environmental crime is the third largest area of criminal activity in the world, generating up to $280 billion in illicit revenue every year. So that's
wild.
That figure is greater than the profit of illegal small arms dealing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes sense because like there are so many things that are disruptive to the environment, to ecosystems, illegal dumping, all kinds of shit like that. And yet corporations can get away with so much of it just because of like lobbies and fucking money.
Mm-hmm.
We create jobs, so you can't shut us down.
Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, straight
Not
up.
you, but...
Oh, well.
We'll get to some of that. More than half of this amount can be attributed to illegal logging and deforestation. So going back to the Fern Gully thing, over half of that $280 billion
is logging.
Logging.
Yeah,
deforestation.
That's wild.
That's so insane. The FBI works with other governmental agencies like the EPA, the Fish and Wildlife Service, Homeland Security, and the Department of Agriculture to prosecute these crimes. And of course, the environment isn't just the US, the FBI. Interpol also identifies and locates environmental criminals. And this is crucial because obviously a lot of these crimes involve trafficking and crossing, different state
borders,
borders, lines, things like that. Okay, so here is a little bit of history about environmentalism. This is from my lover, Encyclopedia Britannica.
Oh, your boo.
Oh, my boo. Concern for the impact on human life of problems such as air and water pollution dates back to at least Roman times. Pollution was associated with the spread of epidemic disease in Europe between the late 14th century and the mid-16th century. And when I read that, I was like, what fucking pollution are they talking about? Oh, wait, there's like shitting in rivers and stuff.
Yeah, because this was like pre-industrialization, but humans create refuse, both
Yeah.
of the body and trash.
We're not exactly promoting like healthy biodiversity in ecosystems.
No, humankind
We're kind
is
of
the greatest
destroying-
threat yeah, to the environment.
Yeah. Soil conservation was practiced in China, India, and Peru as early as 2,000 years ago. Also, we know that Native Americans, indigenous people here, practice basically controlled burns of forests in order to keep them healthy, because that is necessary, and we will get back to more of that.
Yeah, indigenous practices of caring for and living on the land are what is really at the forefront of the land back movement. It's not about, people get it so mixed up with like, oh, Native Americans and indigenous people just want to like kick me out of my house and
Build more casinos.
It's like, no, they want to steward the land that had been stewarded sustainably by their people and their communities and their practices.
Like millennia.
For millennia before we fucking came in and stole it, fucked it all up, and now we're burning it to the ground.
They want to fix your fuck-ups.
Yeah.
Sir.
So, maybe open your mind to those kinds of conversations too. If you care about the environment.
Which we all should, but we'll also get to that. In general, however, such concerns did not give rise to like public activism. So back then they were just for, quote unquote experts at the time. Well, real experts at the time, people who knew what the fuck they were talking about. Other normal, regular people had bigger fish to fry than soil conservation and things like that. The contemporary environmental movement arose primarily from concerns in the late 19th century about the protection of the countryside in Europe and also the wilderness in the United States and the health consequence of pollution during the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was fucking nasty.
Oh.
Nasty.
Bad.
A lot of coal, a lot of mining, a lot of just like sooty children.
Not even,
Stinks.
however, I guess like when you think about the, frankly, irrevocable damage of the Industrial Revolution, we now, in the modern era,
We did get a lot out of it also.
We sure did, but we are producing more carbon emissions now than we did then.
Oh, yeah, because technology has, it exponentially goes up in terms of like progress.
Yeah. So our kids might not be covered in soot, but like, we're fucking it up.
At the time, they didn't know how bad and how quickly a lot of their new technologies were working and were outputting to the environment. And now we do know, and we're still doing it, but a little bit more softly. Oh, God. I promise this wasn't going to be depressing.
How there was no avoiding the depression of this topic. It's not avoidable.
Well, I will throw some like objective science at you that will it made me feel a little more hopeful because it very much highlighted in black and white the problems that we have. So again, we'll get to it. But I do have psych, and I'm very proud of myself for having psych for this episode.
Whoa, hell yeah.
Yeah. So around this time, like late 19th century, environmentalists began moving away from the liberal viewpoint that the free market could solve all of the problems if they were like social, economic, blah, blah, blah. And started promoting the idea that the government probably should establish some regulations, particularly when it came to the preservation of resources. So they were like, oh shit, people are inherently greedy on an individual level. We do not think about the collective, nor do we think about the distant future. So,
three-body problem.
It was just like, we have to get the governments involved to have like enforceable regulations because we will not do this on our own. Which is still true. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, we begin to see organized conservation efforts largely in the US, but also around the world, particularly in like Europe and Oceania, which I always forget exists.
Mm-hmm.
We don't learn about that shit.
We don't.
It's like Canada.
Yep.
And that includes the establishment of state parks and national forests.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first one was in New Mexico. The first one in the US was in New Mexico.
Oh, cool.
So starting in the 1960s, we see the green political movement, quote, in the form of activist non-governmental organizations and environmentalist political parties. So this happened both in and out of the political system.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the diversity of the environmental movement, 4 pillars provided a unifying theme to the broad goals of political ecology. So those were protection of the environment, grassroots democracy,
mm-hmm.
social justice,
mm-hmm.
and nonviolence. So this is kind of the first, well, I shouldn't even say that. It's not the first time. It might be the time when the idea that environmental justice is tied with women's rights, is tied with just basically the safety and the stability of every single facet of every person's life.
Yeah, I mean, all of these kinds of systems of oppression and injustice are intrinsically linked. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if you are someone who cares about environmental justice, but maybe is not paying close attention or investing much in, say, the genocide in Palestine.
Justice. Yeah.
You know, like beyond even just the immediate devastation of Palestinians, like the lasting global environmental impact of what's happening there is terrifying. So like all of this shit
linked.
Affects you at some point, or your next generations at some point. It's all linked together, baby. Which is a scary thought because it can get really overwhelming and makes you think that like, oh my God, all of this is just too big for any one person. But that's where, you know, you get in community and focus on what you can focus on.
And you also have to consider the acute privilege of anyone who can say this thing, for example, the genocide in Gaza,
mm-hmm.
isn't affecting me
mm-hmm.
because I live in
here,
Middlebury, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
My whole family is white. We
mm-hmm.
are upper middle class. This won't touch us.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it will, because
mm-hmm.
when you talk about environmentalism, you don't escape the environment. You
Nope.
can never be rich enough or white enough to always surpass
mm-hmm.
these problems that are affecting every fucking corner of the earth. It doesn't
mm-hmm.
matter.
Mm-hmm.
So the sooner we pay attention and the sooner we start engaging with this and enacting policies that are making positive change,
Mm-hmm.
and also seeing the links between all of these world events, economics, social structure, elections,
mm-hmm.
local elections,
Mm-hmm.
with climate change and the existence of the human race,
Mm-hmm.
the better off we'll be.
Yeah. Girl.
This is what a glass of wine does to me.
Get it. Go off. I'm like horny right now from what you just said. You've got me all like horny.
I'm like horny.
For lack of a better term, incredibly horny over how like woke that entire moment was.
We just gotta start connecting the dots.
Connect the fucking dots, y'all.
Connect the fucking dots.
Like all of the shit that's happening in, you know, what's considered like the global south is all a testing ground for
the global
the
north.
global north. So
you bitch,
yeah.
you
you bitch.
We're talking about
you. Anyway.
You driving down the 101 in your Bentley.
Oh my God. If you
That
have a
San
Bentley,
Andreas fault's gonna slip, Bubby.
if you're driving down the 101 in your Bentley and you're not giving at least $5 a month on Patreon, please stop listening to this podcast.
Give us our blur money, our blur bag.
We can't even blur.
You think you're suffering? We can't even blur.
You think you have it rough? The Blur app is $1.99 a month. In this economy?
And I'm gonna forget to cancel. That's for eternity.
Yeah, that's Rocket Money's problem now.
You have to anticipate never canceling this.
That $1.99 adds up.
Inflation?
Oh,
In 2040? Are you kidding me?
I can't.
No, we're factoring in all of this. All of it.
It's all connected.
The sooner you connect the dots, the better.
We're fucking unhinged. Okay, continue.
Oh, fuck. Okay, so
This podcast is like such a clear reflection of our mental health and the things that we're processing through on any given day.
it's been a long week. It is Friday evening.
And y'all come back and listen to this shit every week. I mean, God bless you.
So sweaty. Oh. Okay.
It's fine. We're fine.
We're totally fine.
Mhm.
Okay, so back to the non-violence thing, the non-violence pillar of green politics.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like groups who are initially committed to nonviolence eventually come across violence.
Well, I mean,
Whether they are perpetrating it or whether it's being perpetrated against them because they have made their stance pretty clear.
yeah, and acts of resistance come in many forms.
Absolutely.
When you think about climate justice and injustice, it is an act of violence on the global population to sentence all of us and future generations to death because a handful of fucking companies don't want to like stop sucking on dinosaur dicks and making fossil fuels. Then I don't know. That's why I'll never be like that pissed about violence as a part of resistance. It happens. Violence
Also,
creates violence.
Violence creates violence is basically the
That's the long and short of it.
that's all you need to know. Because my next sentence was, so of course we have some extreme offshoots of this green movement that engage in violence that they feel is justified because of what we are doing to nature. In particular when it comes to the logging industry, Fern Gully, and also mining industries, which I think just more like directly illustrates, I don't want to use the R word, but like a lot of people would just say we're like raping the planet for resources.
Yeah. I mean, look at what's fucking going on in the Congo.
What has been going on in Africa for hundreds of years.
Yeah. Africa should be the wealthiest fucking continent on the planet. They have the majority of the world's resources. And we've extorted all of it.
And this was all by design. So, yeah, that, etc., is why some groups and some individuals feel that engaging in violence is completely warranted, which I'm not arguing for or against.
No, I mean, it's hard to argue against that when you look at, for this specific example, footage out of Congo of millions of displaced people living in tents, children mining cobalt. I mean, they're dying.
For our iPhones.
Yeah. And so, like, why do we get to judge people who are literally fighting for their lives? We don't. We don't. So before you clutch your pearls, like, really think about that.
So this brings us to eco-terrorism.
Oh, great.
Eco-terrorism is a little bit counterintuitive because it often involves the destruction or the threat of destruction of the environment in order to like make a point to the government or specific companies or even civilians. And then that's done with the intent to interfere with activities allegedly harmful to the environment. So like blowing up a pipeline.
Sure.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Some people, probably people who are more sympathetic to this kind of behavior, would call this anti-system violence because it just disrupts the system.
Yep.
And it's the system that is harming the planet. It is technically bioterrorism, but that is
kind of the point.
We'll get to it. Yeah. So examples include like I said, blowing up a part of the pipeline, threats to contaminate water supplies, or threats to destroy or disable energy utilities. Also, not even threats, like doing it.
Yeah.
As well as practices such as the deployment of anthrax or other biological agents. Because I think in those, I mean, my immediate thought about that was just like, oh, you want to fuck with nature? We're going to let nature fuck with you.
Yeah, I mean, and does that freak me out? Absolutely it does. But I also get it.
I get it. Yeah, I'm not trying to like make a stance on any of these things because it is illegal. It is violent. I don't know how well it's working, but also like I fucking get it.
Yeah.
And I'm more inclined to side with the eco-terrorists in a lot of these cases. Obviously, as with anything, people can get out of control and take things too far.
Of course, and there are bad actors in every fucking movement.
Also, my acknowledgement and like condoning doesn't fucking mean anything, but
no.
I can definitely see both sides to this.
For sure. But yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for the complete destruction of a system that is killing us, regardless of the potential immediate consequence or environmental consequence, to force the hand to a cleaner, more sustainable, more environmentally friendly replacement solution. It's sort of like tear the whole fucking system down and force us to rebuild something that is holistic and
functional.
Sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like putting a spotlight on. It's like when PETA throws red paint on someone wearing a fur coat.
Yeah.
You're not fixing anything.
No.
You're actually damaging the thing that you're trying to conserve in the short run, but you're putting a big old spotlight on it so that hopefully more people will care.
And pay attention.
And
people like to not pay attention to shit until it is directly inconveniencing or affecting them. So
we'll get to it. We'll get to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another form of eco-terrorism, which is often described as environmental warfare, is used as a strategy of war. So, for example, when the U.S. used Agent Orange in Vietnam.
Jesus.
Also, when Iraqi forces set Kuwaiti oil wells on fire during the Persian Gulf, like both of these things, and those are just two examples, had long-lasting, widespread, severe effects because of their environmental modification. So in 1976, the UN outlined all of these things and outlawed those actions. But of course, they still exist. We do that shit all the time. It's a weapon of war crimes, schmore crimes.
I know. We clearly do not enforce that shit. Well, we do, but it just depends on what nation.
Good fucking point. Very good point. But yeah, it depends on, the color of the skin of the people that we're doing this to. And yeah, it is a war crime. And I think you could find examples of this happening, I'm sure, in like Ukraine, obviously in Gaza, widespread, long-lasting, severe effects, changing the environment. You're restricting water and food. And
like currently is what, over 60 or 70% of their farmland is completely destroyed. And like,
so it's things like
lasting
that.
impact to the soil, like things will
Mhm.
not be able to fucking grow there for
So it's elements
generations.
like it's elements like that will permanently alter some aspect of the landscape, the environment, their like
Mhm.
agricultural systems that constitute that particular action as this particular war crime.
Yep.
I don't know. It's just so insidious just to go after like the lifeblood of a part of the planet.
Yeah.
So back to the eco-terrorists. Some of their tactics are quite violent and not great, but some of them are really petty, and I kind of love it.
Okay.
So they're probably at least trespassing when they commit their acts. And sometimes they commit some like light sabotage of like company equipment or the environmentally harmless modification of natural resources in order to make them inaccessible or unsuitable for commercial use.
Mm-hmm.
So examples of this practice, which is known as monkey wrenching, because it's like kind of low stakes.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not gonna kill anyone.
No.
Unless something goes really sideways.
Yeah.
And it's really just meant to fuck up their systems.
Mm-hmm.
So this includes like plugging factory waste outlets so that the waste just backs
shit
up.
backs up?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no.
Because it's like, no, don't dump this in our river. You fucking deal with it.
Yep.
You deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just gonna pass the buck down the road, downriver, literally. No. You create this shit, you deal with this shit.
Mm-hmm.
They would also like drive like metal spikes into living trees so that they can't be logged and milled. Like the wood is useless.
So if it went through the mill, it would like destroy all of the milling equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's genius.
So they'll just go through like a whole forested area and put metal spikes in the tree so that
the tree can grow around it just fine.
The tree's fine.
Yeah.
And no one else can use it.
I love that.
I kind of love that. Other activities described as eco-terrorism include protest actions by animal rights groups, which have included the destruction of property in stores, like retail stores that sell products made of fur, and also the bombing
on animals or things like that. Yeah.
And the bombing of labs that perform experiments on animals.
Mm-hmm.
In the early 90s, the FBI made like a big fucking deal about animal rights activists.
Oh yeah.
This was kind of when like PETA was sort of peaking, and the FBI reacted.
Mm-hmm.
So they made a big deal about criminal penalties for this type of eco-terrorism dramatically increased by the passage of the Animal Enterprise Protection Act. So this
protecting the literal labs, not the fucking animals.
Correct.
Of fucking course.
Animal enterprise.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay.
Not just animals.
Right. The business.
So the business side of the profit-making side of this. So this was primarily concerned with the economic damage that these activists could cause, but also just kind of folded in like any injury or death of human beings.
Yeah, just in case.
In the more severe cases, but this bill was super broad and really vague. So it like disproportionately severely punished animal activists just because they were doing their thing, and now there's a federal law against it.
Jesus.
Even if they didn't like cause any kind of bodily harm or anything.
No, because we always will fucking simp for over destruction of property and fucking up the supply chain and messing with big money. Exactly.
So a little example of this. Straight edge, vegan, environmentalist, and animal liberationist Daniel Andreas San Diego.
Sounds like everyone we made out with in high school.
Everyone.
On Earth Day.
Also, like, he's got to be so much fun at parties.
I bet.
Straight edge, vegan, environmentalist, and animal liberationist.
Listen, I support your cause, but I do not want to be friends with you. I back you. I made out with you in high school. I support you from afar. I'm not inviting you to my wedding. It's not happening.
You're like a solid tally on my bedpost, but I don't want to
that's as far as it goes.
Have a conversation.
No, I don't want a relationship.
That's where my line is. Also, this guy invented and was like trying to start a business based on vegan marshmallows.
Okay.
Like he made marshmallows that didn't have gelatin in them.
That's
and
exciting.
So he was going to like start a business with it.
He's an entrepreneur.
He is an entrepreneur. He was labeled the first domestic terrorist to be put on the FBI's 10 most wanted list.
Okay.
So the FBI alleges that he planted 2 bombs at 2 different animal testing labs. No one was hurt. No one was killed. But the FBI was like after him because of this Animal Enterprise Protection Act. One might say he was a guinea pig for the government. I just
for this new law. Nice.
They wanted
work.
to like make an example out of him for like this animal activism shit. This was like early 2000s. So on October 6th, 2003, he like realized that he was being followed by the FBI. So he parked his car in like a parking garage and then disappeared, and no one has seen him since then. He's on the lam.
Seriously? Good
There's like a $200,000 reward from the FBI for it.
Living off of his vegan marshmallow fortune somewhere overseas.
I mean, if I were to go on the lam with anyone, it would probably be a straight edge vegan environmentalist.
Yeah, I feel like they'd probably be able to figure it out. How to live
like
off the land.
Like doomsday prepper kind of, I don't know, they kind of have a similar vibe.
It's like same vibe, different fonts.
Yes. One's lowercase.
Yeah.
Okay, so like I said, I do have some psychology for us today.
Okay.
Because I think the biggest environmental crime is the people in power doing absolutely nothing to slow or stop climate change.
Hard agree.
I wanted to learn a little bit more about the science behind climate change denial.
Okay.
Or as
I love this.
Or as the Australian Psychological Society puts it, quote, how do we solve the it's not my problem? Because it's really what it boils down to.
Oh, yeah.
Also, this episode is airing after the election. So since I am speaking into the future, I really, really, really hope that we're in a good place.
That we're at least sustaining and not under the orange thumb of the fascist.
I think I told you I had a nightmare that Donald Trump won and then I was being chased with a flamethrower.
You did.
As long as I conveyed that to you.
Yep, you did. I feel your fear.
Okay, thank you. I just want to be seen.
I see you, baby.
So first of all, there are 2 kind of flavors of climate change denial.
Okay.
So the first is if an individual just straight up does not think it's happening at all.
Yeah, just doesn't believe it.
And the second is like the soft denial is an individual kind of thinking / knowing that it's real, but not doing anything to act on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be dead before it's really a problem for me. So why vote?
Why have kids?
Yeah.
If you're not going to vote, if you're not going to do anything to recycle or like do anything, please don't have kids.
Yeah.
Also, this shit's going to impact us in our lifetime. It's not just about future generations. It's
Look at
right now.
What was it? Helene and Milton?
Yeah.
Back to back.
And there are still people like, well, it's hurricane season.
I can't.
Yeah. Yeah, we're here, baby.
California's on fire every year. Maui burned all the way across the fucking island. Y'all, it's happening.
So another way to think about these two different types of denial are explicit denial versus implicit.
Okay.
So this is from the National Center for Science Education. I spelled education wrong. Oh my God. Education.
Don't admit that.
It's too embarrassing not to admit.
Like, girl,
Okay.
don't admit that. I'm trying to help you here.
Okay, quote, climate change denial is most conspicuous when it is explicit. So like, I don't believe in climate change. As it is in controversies over climate education. So like if a school is teaching climate change now.
Yeah. That's fake news.
The idea of implicit denial, however, is increasingly discussed among those who study the controversies over climate change. So implicit denial occurs when people who accept the scientific community's consensus, which, by the way, is 97%, on the answers to the central questions of climate change on the intellectual level, fail to come to terms with it or to translate their acceptance into action. So this would be, people who are in denial, so to speak, about climate change because they're not doing anything about it, but also like, well, we'll get to it. But one example would be like, what difference am I going to make on my own individual small level?
Right. Which, to some degree, I do understand because there's so much propaganda about like passing the buck of the responsibility of lowering your carbon footprint, recycling, doing all of these things that as an individual consumer are good for the environment, while what's the stat? There's like 7 global corporations that are actually responsible for like 85% of climate impact.
Oh,
it's like a yes and.
It's definitely a yes and. But I think that people are very much inclined, which I will get to explaining, very much inclined to not make changes, to not accept that this is a real problem, and also in the same vein to not accept that they can contribute to some kind of solution.
Yep.
Because it's easier and less scary to not go there.
Yeah, totally.
And because this isn't a thing where it's like, oh, there's going to be 8 tornadoes in your area tomorrow.
Right.
If you don't act on this today.
Yeah, the consequence is not immediate.
It's also completely unpredictable. You might never see another tornado in your lifetime. That's unpredictable. But also, 8 tornadoes could tear through your town tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, North Minneapolis is still recovering from a tornado that came through the city in like, when was that? 2015, 2016? So almost 10 years ago.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So back to this like implicit versus explicit, one could view bipartisan politics as Republicans being explicit deniers. No, it doesn't exist. The climate fluctuates every 3,000 years, whatever
it's
the fuck
natural.
their talking points are. And also Democrats who are implicit deniers by admitting that it's a thing and we have to make a change, but we're going to keep drilling in the Arctic.
Yeah.
We're going to keep expanding coal mining.
We're gonna
because
frack.
The economy is the number one. If we don't have economic growth, it's bad.
Yeah.
Like
we'll never be able to fix the problem.
We have to keep growing at all costs. Yeah. So this quote is from a study from nature.com. Quote, we estimate that 14.8% of Americans do not believe in climate change. So these would be explicit deniers. This denialism is highest in the central and southern United States. However, it also persists in clusters within certain states, for example, California, where belief in climate change is otherwise pretty high. Political affiliation has the strongest correlation of who does or does not believe, quote unquote, in climate change, followed by level of education, COVID-19 vaccination rates.
That correlation makes a lot of sense, actually.
Carbon intensity of the regional economy. So, like, if your whole economy is dependent on coal,
then you're going to fight to keep your job.
You're not going to admit that climate change exists because that's your whole livelihood, which I understand.
Yeah, it's deeply troubling, and I get it. That's one of the fucking many adverse effects of capitalism. We can't survive unless we are producing something and making money.
And growing the economy.
Then it's not in your immediate best interest to, buck your own industry that's fucking keeping food on you and your family's table. It's insidious.
The last factor is income, which I think kind of relates to a couple of those previous factors. Renowned environmental psychologist Robert Gifford has identified 33 barriers to climate action, which he calls, in the most badass fashion, the Dragons of Inaction.
Ooh, I like that.
So there's 33 dragons. And these are behavioral, cognitive things, psychological things that prevent any given person from taking pro-environmental action. So the first one is limited cognition. So this is simply if they don't have the information, or if they have inaccurate information, or if they get their news exclusively from Fox and Facebook.
Yeah.
This would also include people who don't think, like I said, that they can make a difference on their own and contribute to positive change without like, oh, well, there are 7 corporations that contribute to that, which I'm not like mocking or anything, but like people are like, well, this has to happen on a legislative corporate level for it to make any kind of a difference.
Which is true, but that won't happen unless we as the consumers push for that to happen. So we still have to take action.
It's my opinion that it's going to be a domino effect, and we have to vote with our dollars. That's the only thing that's going to have an effect.
Literally.
It's strictly greed and money. That's what it's about, period. And if our solutions don't have a way of generating profit, it's not going to happen.
Not in the current system, that's for sure.
Second dragon, ideological worldviews. So these are preconceived ideas such as the belief that God is in charge. Or
let go and let God. Jesus take the wheel.
Book of Revelation, there's going to be floods and fires. And oh, look, there's floods and there's fires. Jesus is coming. It's a good thing. Also, people who believe in free enterprise capitalism, or that the future technologies are going to solve this problem. Like, oh, it's in the hands of the next generation.
They'll figure it out.
This would also include the don't tread on me camp. Also, I think conspiracy theories would go here too. This is ideology stuff.
Yeah.
And sure. That is associated with like the collective narcissism of certain groups that are like, we've been wronged by this other group. It's not fair. Whatever. Like these rules don't apply to us.
Sure.
It's my freedoms.
Yeah.
Don't take away my freedoms. I don't want to drive a smart car.
Yeah. Fuck you.
Yeah. Okay. Then we have social comparison. So these are people who people in general will adopt the behaviors of others around them that they admire, like so-called influencers. And these behaviors include energy consumption. So if everyone in your neighborhood is getting solar panels and making a big deal about turning your lights off when you're not home and setting your thermostat to like a smart, like, oh, we're out of town, we don't need it at this time, things like that, then you would be more likely to participate in those behaviors as well. Yeah,
it almost becomes like a social cultural practice because like your community is engaging in these practices together and influencing each other in this direction.
And it works the other way around, too, because if a person believes that no one else around them is making any pro-environmental changes, then they won't either, because that's not fair. Why am I responsible for making up for all of your shit? Donald Trump is often cited as the biggest influencer when it comes to climate change denial, because Trump doesn't think it's real, so it's not real. And then another example that I read in this article, the Ford F-150
yes,
continues to be America's best-selling vehicle despite having terrible gas mileage. That's just the dudes in their big trucks. This is the dudes in their big trucks category.
Yeah.
Next, we have sunk costs and momentum. So this is when people see their investments, which doesn't necessarily only apply to financial investments. It can be just like time, emotion, whatever. But it's investments that a person has made that they don't want to sacrifice. So, for example, owning a car. I want to own a car because
I worked hard for this car.
I also don't have time to utilize public transportation. If I want to go to Target, I want to go to Target right now. I'm not waiting for a bus. I'm not figuring out my connections. I'm not going to haul everything back in a bus. Same with like composting. If your city or a municipality doesn't have like a composting
bin system,
I don't even know what it's called because I don't compost, then you're not going to compost. Also, habits such as like your diet, if you're vegan or vegetarian, this falls into this category. Additionally, how you feel about where you live. And this is a psychology component known as place attachment. So if you love your home, if you love your community, you love your neighborhood where you live, that's going to impact your behavior. I'm going to go around the block and pick up litter.
Yep. I'm going to support it. I'm going to invest in it.
I'm going to vote.
I'm going to care for it.
I'm going to vote for the politicians who want to improve the drainage situation in the park up the hill. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's your place attachment. I think this was a big one. Disbelief in experts and authorities. So this is very self-explanatory. Like I said, despite a 97% scientific consensus that humans are causing the climate crisis, a large portion of the populace does not trust, quote unquote, them, scientists, anyone in charge. This is a major problem.
Yeah.
So here's a little quote from the New Yorker, quote, "Even in a stable constitutional republic, a cynical or unmoored citizenry presents an opportunity for demagogues and populists." Sound familiar? As much as stagnant wages in former manufacturing regions, so like coal country, glaring economic inequality, or white backlash after the Obama presidency, the country's disillusionment with institutions enabled Donald Trump's election. Again, connect the dots, people.
Yep.
All of this is intertwined. By the way, Trump's administration significantly diminished regulations and policies concerning the environment to the point where it's going to be really, really hard to gain that ground back.
Yeah.
He did a lot of damage.
Yeah, we mentioned
flew under the radar.
We mentioned the Chevron decision in the lead crimes episode, but it's obviously also incredibly pertinent to this conversation.
Last, I think this is the last. Nope, second to last dragon. We have our perceived risks of change. So this is when you question, like, are my changes going to pay off in the long run? Is going vegan really going to make that much of a difference? Or am I just losing out on, like, the life satisfaction and joy of butter for the rest of my life? And it's not really going to make a difference.
I'm sorry. I will sentence the world to death before I will give up cheese. Like, I'm just being honest.
You have a lot of options in terms of your particular actions. There's a lot of things you could do, and there are a lot more people.
Vegan's not the only way.
No, thank God.
It is a way. And
it's a very important way. I think going vegan is actually extraordinarily beneficial.
And it's radical.
Do I have the bravery to do that yet? No.
I have a lot of respect for people who do it. And, there are certainly people who do it because their bodies literally, like, can't process the foods that I shove into my gullet every fucking day. But, like, people who do make that decision to make a environmental or political impact, I commend you, and I will default to other methods. I'm already diabetic. There's so much in my food life that I have to fucking deal with. I've got enough on my plate.
Yeah.
Figuratively and literally.
I'm not a vegan, and I don't really have any real excuse not to be, but I'm just not there yet. I'm not there right now. I'm not going to say yet because that implies a promise, and I'm not promising anything. We're also about to go to Italy, for fuck's sake. I'm not putting any dietary restrictions on myself. We're also flying to Italy. Air travel is a big one.
It really is.
Okay. Moving away from how bad we are. There's also the factors of psychological distance. So, like, you could attribute this to cognitive dissonance, but also be like, I have enough to deal with today. Making these changes is not an immediate concern. I'm just going to kick that can down the road. That's psychological distance. Spatial distance. Spatial distance would be me in Iowa, you in Minnesota. We're not going to get flooded anytime soon. People underestimate the risk of natural disasters in their community because our brains weigh experience a lot more than, like, analysis or statistics. So if something's never happened to you, you just assume that it never will happen to you. And that's not to say that hypothetically, like you were just talking about tornadoes in North Minneapolis. Hypothetically, of course, a tornado could rip down your street. But, like, you don't really think that might happen. And even if you did think it might happen, you're not just going to be like, I'm going to start recycling today to prevent this.
Yeah, none of us really thought that the cities at St. Paul, Minneapolis were all that in danger of tornado activity because the areas surrounding us in the not too far suburbs have much more conducive conditions for tornado activity. And yet it is happening. And you're right. Even in a community as small as Minneapolis, I live on the south side, there's certainly a dissonance there as well. Like, well, yeah, that happened on the north side. That's not going to happen here.
Isn't that terrible? It happened 5 miles away.
Yeah, if that. I mean, it's like, y'all, this city is small as fuck. And this is an interesting concept because we in the Midwest, I think, are very guilty of this kind of cognitive dissonance because we're not coastal. And so we don't have the same weather patterns as, say, hurricane areas like in the Gulf or in Florida or up the East Coast. We also weren't seeing as many forest fires, impacts of drought, things like that were happening, say, in California. But like every year, I mean, Minnesotans are definitely feeling it. Every summer is drier and drier. There are like lake waters that are drying up. You can see like Midwest desert-like conditions developing right now in our state. And lots of people are looking at cities like Des Moines, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Detroit, these like beautiful Midwestern cities that are right on the Great Lakes as like climate oases where it's like, okay, it's not too hot and they get good rainfall and there's access to clean water and we're not going to deal with hurricanes and there aren't as many forest fires. It's like, okay, sure, for now. But then as the populations explode because of climate refugees, which is a very fucking real thing, then all of these other climate impacts are just going to start developing in those areas as they're overpopulated. So it's just a fucking snake eating its own tail. You can't just move from a hurricane zone to what for now is a safer or more stable climate area, say in the United States, and expect it to expect that to be the only thing you need to do to avoid the climate crisis, and that it's fine. It's like, no.
I heard someone on NPR a couple weeks ago. I forgot what the segment was, but she was being interviewed and she said that she and her family decided to move from, it was either California or like Idaho, but basically somewhere where there was a bunch of like wildfires. And she's like, it's only a matter of time before we lose everything. So we're going to move. So like a year ago, they moved to Asheville
And,
to escape climate related disasters. And then look at what happened to Asheville a few weeks ago.
Well, and to the point of how climate change is changing what we have grown to understand about like what areas are affected by certain climate disasters. These hurricanes came farther inland than I think any that we've ever seen in the United States.
It's unbelievable.
So yeah, it's just it's unfolding right before our eyes, and it's not cute.
It's not cute.
It's not fucking cute.
So the last dragon that I want to mention is perhaps the most obvious. This is inadequate behavioral changes. So this is just plain old not doing enough. Not recycling, not using reusable bags, not using reusable straws. I'm guilty of both of those things. Buying fast fashion, the clothing and fashion industry.
That's bad.
If you start digging into that shit, that's fucking nuts. So it's very scary to look climate change in the eye and like name it, address it. A lot of bad things have already happened. A lot of bad things are gonna happen because you cannot fix this shit overnight. Anxiety, depression, despair, grief, etc. Of course, we would like to ignore it, but that is absolutely not the answer for not only, like I said, our kids' generations, but this one, us now. Social scientists are trying to change the way we talk about climate change to not be quite so doomsday-y, so people are more hopeful, so people are more inspired to actually take action. I also saw an interview with David Hogg, the Marjorie Stone, the school shooting. One of them. I almost said Marjorie Taylor Greene school shooting, which is not correct.
Well, it's also not that far off.
Stoneman Douglas. There's too many school shootings. Great. And he was saying, and the interviewer was like, I think it was on the Daily Show. The interviewer was like, how do you stay positive? Because like in your interviews, you're like kind of upbeat, kind of smiling, whatever. And he was like, if we don't convey hope or joy in this process of making these changes, no one's going to follow us. Yeah. Because it comes down to hope and the belief that things can change. And if you're not on board with that, you're just going to drown in a pool of your own misery, and then the world's going to end anyway. So try to put a good face on it. Yeah. Do your best. And then the last thing I'm going to say, I think this kind of pro-environmental action sort of swings the other way as well, which I think is what you're going to talk about today. Where some people are actively seeking ways to reduce their carbon footprint that don't actually make any difference at all. And in some cases might be contributing more harm than good. And then the example that I thought of, because I've had conversations about this with some friends.
Including me, because I have one of these.
Using a fake Christmas tree. The holidays are coming up. I think it's a common misconception that cutting down a real tree and using that for your Christmas tree, if you put up a Christmas tree, is worse for the environment because you're cutting down a tree. But that's not actually true. So this is from the Nature Conservancy. Quote, in the U.S., around 10 million artificial trees are purchased each season. Nearly 90% of those are shipped across the world from China, resulting in an increase of carbon emissions and resources. And because of the material they are made out of, most artificial trees are not recyclable and end up in local landfills.
Mm-hmm.
Alternatively, out of the between 350 to 500 million trees growing on tree farms across the United States, only 30 million trees are harvested for Christmas each year.
Mm-hmm.
So these tree farms, they're not dumb. They're farmers growing trees, and they let these trees grow for like 10 or 12 or 15 years. And then they just kind of rotate them out. Those are the ones that they harvest.
Some farms have programs where you can return your tree and they can be replanted or reused in the soil.
So the trees in my parents' neighborhood in Minnesota, they have a big tree burning party. They burn their trees in the middle of the frozen over lake. Mm-hmm. And then they like put aside the burned carcasses, and then they dump them in the middle of the lake later because they're perfect like fish houses. The fish like it. The bottom of the lake loves a tree.
Yeah.
Don't take my word on that. Check with your local authorities. But that's what we don't want to fill up all of our lakes with old trees, but buying real trees will help keep tree farms in business and in turn keep their lands covered in the healthy forest habitat that wildlife depends on to survive. Because like we said, a lot of indigenous communities would like regularly do controlled burns. It's healthy for these forests to be like restored. And also a lot of species depend on what's called a disturbance event to leave the area and seek out new, younger forests where their presence contributes to the ecosystem. For example, the common yellow throat.
Wow.
That is my segment.
Wow. You really did it.
I went there.
You went there. We went there. We're going to stay there. Okay, so my segment today, I picked this because a couple years ago, I'm basically influenced most in my life by John Oliver and Last Week Tonight, which is like maybe my favorite like comedy news show ever. But he did an episode on carbon offsets that was very interesting. And I wanted to talk.
I haven't seen that one.
It's from 2022. I have it linked in my sources. So it's not the full episode, but it is like the main Story Tonight segment. You can watch it on YouTube for free. So even if you don't have Max, like you can watch pretty much all of his show on YouTube within like a couple days of it coming out. So highly recommend if you don't have HBO Max to go on YouTube and watch some of his stuff, because he covers like really important, pertinent topics in the news cycle in a way that's incredibly smart and incredibly well researched, but also really easy to absorb because he's also a comedian. So like he'll make you cry, but he will also make you laugh. It's, not to say that we're anything like that, but it kind of sometimes the delivery reminds me a little bit of what we try to do here on Wine and Crime. So I appreciate
what we try to do. I also like how pointedly he will call out the wrongdoers.
Yeah, I mean, including the parent company of his own show, like, which is one of the things that I appreciate about him, because I just feel like, obviously he's a rich man, but like he's still, I don't know, he tackles a lot of topics that are just not covered widely in the media, even surrounding widely covered news events. He just takes it that extra step that I think is so important and so often missed, and delivers it in such an easy to disseminate way that often leaves me at the end of an episode going down a rabbit hole and trying to learn as much about that topic as possible, which I think is one of the most effective things about his show. Is like it really gets people thinking like, oh shit, I have to learn more about this, because I don't obviously know everything after 35 to 40 minutes of a comedy news segment.
And understanding it in a way where they can talk to their friends about it.
Exactly.
Like, have you heard about
carbon offsetting?
Carbon emissions.
So I'm going to talk to you about it today.
Great.
So carbon emissions refer to the release of carbon, primarily in the form of carbon dioxide, CO2, into the atmosphere. These emissions come from various sources, including burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas for energy. It happens because of deforestation. Not only the process, like the actual machinery that cuts down the trees, but removing the trees, which are like the Earth's natural filter for carbon dioxide.
Okay, so that's like where it stems from. We're removing trees that replenish the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
That soak it up. They're like the most effective at soaking up excess carbon dioxide and cleaning the air and then storing that carbon dioxide, in the tree and kind of filtering it out in a natural process that's been obviously happening on our planet for fucking billions of years.
So it's like the liver of Earth.
Yes, and we are destroying it constantly. And obviously, yeah, right? And obviously,
Cheers.
industrial processes contribute to carbon emissions.
Oh, Fern Gully.
Carbon dioxide, it's so topical that you watched that recently. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, which means it traps heat in the Earth's atmosphere, creating a greenhouse effect. While this effect is necessary to keep the planet warm enough for life, excess greenhouse gases cause too much heat to be trapped, leading to global warming and climate change. Over the past century, human activities have significantly increased CO2 levels in the atmosphere, intensifying this warning. So, why you should give a shit about this in layman terms, because I'm not a fucking scientist. Some of the largest effects of global warming, obviously rising global temperatures, people literally dying from the heat, like the elderly are very susceptible to this. Freshwater resources drying up, so it's diminishing the global water supply. Farmland becoming unsustainable to support crop growth or livestock maintenance. Like you can't grow.
It takes so much fucking water to keep a cow alive.
Yep.
Like what? Yeah. The availability of fresh water is like a major. It's major because a lot more things require so much more water than you would anticipate.
They really do.
Almond milk.
Yeah.
Almond milk takes so much water to grow a fucking almond.
It does.
And then you milk it.
Ugh. Ocean warming is something that, you hear talked about a lot, but along with the warming of the ocean because of carbon dioxide is acidification of the ocean. So there are currently parts of the ocean with acid levels so high that nothing can survive in those areas of the ocean.
What?
Yeah, like fish, plants, they can't live there. Coral bleaching, that's becoming a bigger and bigger problem. Like a couple of years ago, there were all these photos of, what was it, the Great Barrier Reef that had gotten bleached out. And some of it can regenerate, but a lot of it can't. And those coral reefs support a massive ecosystem of fish, not just fish that we rely on for food, but also fish biodiversity, fish that the food fish also need fish to eat. It's all fucking connected. It's all fucking connected.
Let's not only be solely concerned about food fish.
No, of course not. But it's just
planet Earth fish.
Yes, but just to point out that that the immediate impact that humans are seeing is that there's massive destruction of oceanic ecosystems that feed the entire global population. The fish you're getting at the grocery store is not from the lake down the street most of the time.
So
sorry, you were going to say something.
The acidification, is that related to salt content? Probably not, but do you know anything about the acidification?
I'm not 100%
where
sure
that comes from?
It's connected to the increased CO2 in the atmosphere. And I think it's also a byproduct of the warming of the ocean. It's just as the ocean is heating up, the actual chemical balance, the structure of the ocean is changing. Yeah. Obviously extreme weather events, all the hurricanes and things that I hadn't really thought about. We have these issues of feedback loops that worsen climate change. So melting ice caps, rising sea levels. We've got floods. We've got coastal erosion. We've got homes literally falling into the ocean. We've got that image burned in our brains of the polar bear trying to hunt on one sad polar ice cap.
So, no.
But other things like permafrost melt. So permafrost has methane in it and it's safe while it's frozen and trapped in the permafrost. But when that melts, potent greenhouse gases, one of which is methane, is released into the atmosphere. And that also accelerates global warming, leading to even more permafrost melting.
Oh.
Forests die off. So droughts, wildfires that kill large areas of forest, massive deforestation. This reduces the number of trees that absorb CO2 and releases the stored carbon that's in those trees into the atmosphere as trees decompose or burn, creating a cycle of increasing CO2 levels.
I didn't think about that. All this shit that's stored in the trees.
Mm-hmm. Greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, drive these global changes, and their impacts are felt across every part of the planet. Reducing emissions is essential to mitigating these risks, preserving ecosystems, and protecting human health and livelihoods, as well as just like animals and plants and the earth. And it seems like a huge undertaking that's out of our control, and some of it is naturally occurring, which is like that thing that the Republicans love to point to. Like, yes, there have absolutely been global climate shifts throughout the Earth's history.
Thousands of years, you fucking dumbasses.
Yeah, exactly. But the majority, as we've talked about, is man-made. So fossil fuel, the main sources of carbon emissions, fossil fuel combustion. So our cars, airplanes, factories that burn fossil fuels, releasing CO2 as a byproduct. Electricity production. Coal-fired power plants are still in major use and one of the largest single sources of CO2 emissions. Deforestation, like we said, cutting down forests, that reduces the number of trees that are absorbing that carbon dioxide. Agricultural practices, livestock and certain agricultural practices actually release methane and other potent greenhouse gases. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one of those sort of politicized, global climate change reasons why people go vegetarian or go vegan, is because if you're consuming less meat, then there's less need to raise these cows, and then there are less cow farts that are choking the planet.
And also less water being used to water the cattle, and also grow the hay that feeds them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The hay, the corn, all that shit. So
much water.
There are lots of things that can be done to address the problem, but one very popular one is so popular because it doesn't really hold corporations accountable for reducing their own carbon emissions.
Good.
So within the last 10 years, maybe less, we've started to see the rising popularity of carbon offset programs. Carbon offset programs.
Every time you buy a flight.
Yes. Do you want to give $2 to offset 2,000 miles of your flight? Surprise.
Is that the primary place where people offset their carbon emissions, or are there more?
For individuals, yes. A lot of airlines do offer that. This is more of a corporate practice.
Okay.
But individuals can absolutely do this. They can make investments in certain programs that sometimes do, but oftentimes claim to be doing things that will reduce global carbon emissions.
Okay.
But it's oftentimes a big old fucking scam. So carbon offset programs allow individuals, organizations, and corporations to compensate for their carbon emissions by investing in environmental projects that reduce or capture an equivalent amount of carbon dioxide. These projects typically involve activities such as reforestation, renewable energy products like building wind farms, methane capture, and energy efficiency improvements. By investing in these initiatives, companies and individuals effectively, quote unquote, offset their carbon footprint without having to reduce their usage and their emissions by supporting efforts that help reduce the overall concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. That's the theory.
So
that's what they're selling you.
You buy a plane ticket. You're like, yes, I will donate.
I'll round up
1%. Mm-hmm. I'll round up to offset my emissions. And then they just donate that money to some vague nonprofit that claims to be planting trees
and
that
I hate
will
to say
one day maybe offset the damage you've done to the atmosphere.
But one of those nonprofits is the one that you got your Christmas tree stat about. Which doesn't make it not true. It doesn't make it not true.
Okay, for the record, I found that same information from multiple sources.
I'm not fighting whether or not that's a legitimate statistic. But I think that just serves to show you how easy it can be to be duped by some of these organizations that
the Nature Conservancy. Who doesn't trust that?
Right, exactly.
Me now.
Well, we'll get to it. So how carbon offset programs work. So an organization or a company, a corporation will calculate their emissions. An individual can do this as well. You calculate the total amount of carbon emissions generated typically over the course of a year. And then you purchase offsets. You buy carbon credits, which are typically equivalent to 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide, from certified projects that reduce or capture greenhouse gases. Remember, certified.
This sounds like such bullshit.
It's money laundering.
Yeah.
Carbon
credits. Okay.
And you support climate projects. So the purchase credits fund projects that aim to either reduce emissions, like investing in wind energy, or capture CO2, like tree planting. It all sounds good. But these are corporations we're talking about. So obviously there's fuckery afoot.
Obviously.
Several companies and organizations have faced legal scrutiny, lawsuits, and regulatory investigations for misleading or fraudulent carbon offset claims known as greenwashing. So greenwashing is used by many corporations as a marketing ploy promising to offset their environmental impacts with programs that may not be effective at all to make you as the consumer feel good about choosing their product. So Volkswagen did this. They were, it wasn't carbon offsets that they did, but they were like, oh, we're trying to go not carbon neutral, but like reduce our carbon emissions with this new car that we're putting out. But then
we're the hippie car.
Yeah. And they had done all of this intense marketing about how this particular car was like so much better for the environment and released X% fewer carbon emissions than any other car on the market. And then
is this in the 60s?
No, I think this was fairly recent.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking of something that I saw while I was reading this, but didn't actually include in my notes. So I'm not going to be able to like be perfect about this.
Okay.
But long and short of it is people actually looked into these vehicles and it was a complete lie. They were not reducing any carbon emissions. Nothing was different. It was all bullshit. And they got sued for it. And they ended up having to pay big fines for false advertising, basically. One of the challenges in prosecuting fraudulent carbon offset claims is the complexity of measuring and verifying carbon reduction impacts. Additionally, many carbon offset standards lack strict legal oversight. Like, we'll get to it, but there's one company or organization, quote unquote, based out of Washington that is like the quote unquote gold standard for carbon emission oversight and like these programs. So they like create the programs, they fund the programs, and they self-regulate without additional oversight over them. So it's very much like
not problematic.
It's like the cops investigating themselves when something is not right.
Yeah.
But on this massive scale. So they lack this oversight, making it easier for companies to make broad, unverified claims about going carbon neutral, which is like a very buzzwordy, popular thing for a lot of companies to say that they have a goal to go carbon neutral by 2025 or whatever. Really what that often means is we're going to buy more carbon offsets to make it look like we're balancing or neutralizing out the carbon that we're creating. They're not actually reducing their own carbon emissions. They're buying more carbon offsets that we're about to get to, which aren't even real in a lot of cases.
Yeah, these offset credits, there's no way they're not bullshit. They're already doing the damage by completing the service.
Yep.
What are you offsetting about a plane?
Oh, girl, it's crazy.
From like LA to LaGuardia or something. What the fuck are you offsetting?
Fuck all is what you're offsetting.
Planting a few trees?
Yeah.
Well,
we'll get to that.
Oh my God.
Carbon offsets have become the go-to solution for many large corporations claiming to go carbon neutral. It's also used by companies operating in areas with emissions caps, like a lot of companies in California. California has state regulations that cap carbon emissions at a certain point. But companies, manufacturers, they can go over those emission caps in their area by just buying these carbon credits and going, well, we're carbon neutral because we supported this forest in Brazil, so we're good. So that
it just like buys you extra credit points, but like, oh, my car doesn't meet the emission standards, but I have these 10 credits from my car company.
And where they're making those investments, buying those offsets, is often in completely different parts of the world, not even in the very communities that they're polluting. Furthermore, these programs can be intentionally misleading because they lack what's referred to as additionality, meaning the commitment to adding, for instance, trees that soak up CO2. So like there are all these, some carbon offset programs will work with landowners in parts of the world where they pay the landowner to commit to not cutting down any of the trees on their land, which doesn't actually increase the number of trees globally because it leaves room for the landowner next door to not participate in that program and cut down all of their trees.
Also, what I said, like, the problem isn't cutting down trees. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah.
It is a lot more complicated than that.
It is. Absolutely. On top of that, project proposals for these offset programs have been like known to be extremely overblown. So like a carbon offset program that is focusing on, say, a forest will say, oh, this forest is in crisis. It's subject to deforestation, yada, yada, yada. You have to put all of this money in here, and then we'll give you these carbon offset credits for preserving this area. When that area may not even be in crisis at all. They're just profiting off of the sales of the offsets to quote unquote preserve or repair what doesn't even need additional preservation. Like,
yeah, it's like, please let this forest continue to exist. It's like, is it in imminent danger if I don't do anything? Or is it in imminent danger if you don't cut it down?
The examples are egregious. So one example highlighted by John Oliver on Last Week Tonight is an offset program offered to folks when they buy flights that will secure preservation of a quote-unquote farm in New Jersey that's actually a privately owned hunting club owned by a billionaire, a single billionaire white man who claimed that 77% of the forest on this vast land area, I mean, it's a huge forested area. It's a beautiful property. He said like, 77% of this forest could be cleared out in 5 years without the support of these carbon offset programs, which is clearly a lie. This is private property owned by a billionaire who could just
you fucking
choose not to cut down the trees. Yeah. He's making plenty of money off of his hunting club, and now he's getting more money from unknowing consumers who pay a few extra dollars to offset their travel emissions. But it's just going to this fucking guy.
These carbon credits are a bribe, hypothetically, to not let this billionaire sell his land to be cut
to someone
down.
Who might cut down the trees.
Wow. Yep. It's outbidding the loggers. That's it. And that's even hypothetical because who knows if it's working? Mm-hmm. There's no accountability here.
None.
Dude.
And in something John Oliver talked about in the instance of the like private landowners that can be paid incentives not to cut down their trees, that doesn't even mean never cutting down their trees. So in some cases, they're paid to not cut a tree down for a year.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
This isn't a permanent solution.
No.
And then also going back to like the restoring of the forests, like at some point, it has to go. At some point, it has to go. But like the issue is not timing that out and using these forests as just money trees.
Yeah.
Like you're just not timing it appropriately.
Another example was your boy, the Nature Conservancy.
Okay, sorry. That wasn't the only source I saw.
I know. I just thought that was really funny. Who sold offsets to Disney to support preservation of a forest in Pennsylvania that was already like a preserve. It's already a preserved forest. It's not subject to deforestation at all. And in return for investing all this money into this specific forest to quote unquote keep it from being deforested, Disney could claim that they reduced over 4 million tons of carbon dioxide. But they didn't. If they simply
just paid a company that had
overseeing
nothing to
an already
do with
preserved
anything.
forest.
Oh my God.
So no, they didn't. And all of this doesn't even address the reality that we're producing so much CO2 globally that we literally don't have room on planet Earth to plant enough trees to offset carbon emissions. And yet that's like the most popular carbon offset.
It's not about the pasta.
It's all about the pasta.
It's not about the trees. And it's more complicated than that.
He talks about too, like, wind farms are great, but for it to actually have a true climate impact, the money has to be going toward wind farms that wouldn't have been built without that money, not just like maintaining or helping fund a project that's already paid, like planned out and paid out.
Yeah, just blowing more money into something that's already really well funded and fully operational.
And it would have to replace a like fossil fuel or coal fuel energy source. So just building another wind farm, yes, that's a great idea. But if you're not building one to take away another, it's not carbon neutral.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's corporate bullshit is what it is. So companies use this as the default to claim that they're carbon neutral when that literally isn't possible under current fossil fuel energy and manufacturing practices. And the most popular one seems to be because people feel good about like, oh, every time I buy this thing, they're planting a tree. Yeah, that sounds really great. And in theory, that would work, but we don't have room to do that. And communities we'll get to have suffered displacement to accommodate some of these programs of reforestation, which is also fucked up.
Come on.
So an investigation released by The Guardian last year uncovered the disturbing reality that, quote, the forest carbon offsets approved by the world's leading certifier and used by Disney, Shell, Gucci, and other big corporations are largely worthless and
Disney, Shell, Gucci. Where the fuck is Gucci on that list?
Tons of bands do this. Like My Chemical Romance did this. Fucking
did what?
Like when they
the carbon offset thing?
Yeah, John Oliver talks about this in a funny part of the bit where like they know that there's an environmental impact of going on tour. It uses a lot of energy, so they were investing in carbon offsets as part of their tour, which like
Delta, I think Delta
does it. American Airlines does it. United Airlines does it. Like tons of corporations do it. And on the surface, it seems like a great idea, but they're just not effective the way that they need to be. It's essentially corporate money laundering. And I'm fairly certain because so many of these corporate offset or carbon offset programs are nonprofit, like 501c3s, then these corporations also get huge tax write-offs for putting all of this money there.
So it literally is laundering.
It's laundering money.
Oh, bitch.
It's laundering money. And other big corporations are largely worthless and could make global heating worse, according to a new investigation. The research into Vera, the world's leading carbon standard for the rapidly growing $2 billion voluntary offsets market, like that's how much money these offset purchases are making.
By just people being like, round up to the nearest dollar to offset your carbon emissions or whatever.
That and all these corporations buying these offsets. Over $2 billion.
Offsets. It's like Bitcoin. It's just a little imaginary, hey, you want to send $20 to this money laundering
to Dogecoin
scheme?
Cool. You just bought Elon Musk another, I don't know, wife or some shit.
Spaceship.
Wife. I don't know why that came to mind, but whatever. So
he does have like 25 kids.
I can't. Has found that based on analysis of a significant percentage of the projects, more than 90% of their rainforest offset credits, among the most commonly used by companies, are likely to be phantom credits and do not represent genuine carbon reductions.
Fuck You.
Yeah. So if you've never heard of Vera or Vera, you're def not alone. I wasn't really aware of what it was until I had watched that John Oliver thing, and I had to get a Wikipedia refresher. So the Verified Carbon Standard, formerly the Voluntary Carbon Standard, is a standard for certifying carbon credits to offset emissions. And VCS is administered by Vera, a 501c3 organization. They're the main certifier of carbon offset programs.
And they're just bullshit.
And most of them are bullshit. As of 2020, there were over 1,500 certified VCS projects covering energy, transportation, waste, forestry, freight, other sectors that Vera
Airlines.
that Vera had not necessarily airlines, but like carbon offset projects for this. That Vera had said.
Okay, so like the recipients of these credits.
Is a lot of these are overseen by Vera, who will say like, yes, that's a certified and like an American certified carbon offset legitimate program. It's the program of choice for most of the forest credits in the voluntary market and almost all the REDD Plus projects. So back to this investigation wait. It's the cops investigating themselves.
Wait, is the red thing like when they had like red like Razor flip phones?
That might have been part of it.
Do you remember the red campaign?
REDD.
I don't remember how it was spelled, but it was like I don't even remember what they were like.
Hold on, let me pop
red.
This in. REDD stands for Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation in Developing Countries. The plus stands for Additional Forest-Related Activities that protect the climate, namely sustainable management of forests and the conservation and enhancement of forest carbon stocks. So that easily could have been a partnership that like any corporation would do.
I'm looking up the red Razor phone because that is what I specifically remember. Different. It's different.
Okay.
Different. The product red Razor phone was partnered with the
like
global fund programs, which positively impact the lives of women and children affected by HIV/AIDS in Africa.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's like an actually legitimate thing. This is
we don't know that.
I guess not.
It could be just as fucking phony as this.
I know we talked about how like
phony
general distrust in like our government and world leaders, etc. But like
corporate money laundering.
There's fucking mistrust because like look at this shit. Yes. How do you expect us to trust fucking anything?
For real?
Come on. So back to this Guardian article and investigation. I'm going to go over some highlights from this investigation, this article, but I definitely recommend reading the full article, which will be linked in my sources. It's wild. So a little bit more about this organization claiming to provide carbon neutrality through its reforestation programs. Vera, which is based in Washington, D.C., operates a number of leading environmental standards for climate action and sustainable development, including its Verified Carbon Standard, the VCS, that has issued more than 1 billion carbon credits.
Jesus.
So that's basically tossing the coin that says, yep, you reduce this much carbon.
And everyone clapped.
And then everyone clapped. It approves 3/4 of all voluntary offsets. So like of all of the programs that are available to buy carbon offsets, Vera is the standard, the organization of approval to say, yes, 3/4 of all of these programs, they're like, yes, this is making an impact. You are reducing carbon emissions.
Yes, you are reducing carbon emissions.
Are the reductionist link. Its rainforest protection program makes up 40% of the credits that it approves and was launched before the Paris Agreement with the aim of generating revenue for protecting ecosystems. But upon investigation of this world leader in climate action, the team discovered, quote, only a handful of Vera's rainforest projects showed evidence of deforestation reductions, according to 2 studies with further analysis indicating that 94% of the credits had no benefit to the climate. None. I know.
We might as well say none.
Yeah,
none.
94%.
None.
The threat to forests had been...
God.
This is part of what we talked about earlier with like that hunting lodge in fucking New Jersey. the threat to forests under some that they were selling credits for it for a lot of these programs have been
Lodge in New Jersey. What are you talking about?
that billionaire who owned that forested area.
Okay.
He runs it as like a hunt, like people can come and hunt on that land.
And it's got to be a massive
It's huge.
tract of land.
It's huge. It's beautiful and beautifully preserved, but
Probably.
like it's privately owned, and he sells access to it to other rich fucks that want to go hunt there.
And apparently sells non-access.
Sells
You
climate
pay
credits,
me
offsets.
to not do anything. That'd be great for a year. And then you pay me again next year.
Mm-hmm.
That's some mob shit.
It is. So the threat to forests in a lot of these programs that Vera had certified had been overstated by about 400% on average for Vera projects, according to analysis of a 2022 University of Cambridge study. So like they were saying that the threat was over 400% higher to these areas that were asking for this money, essentially, than it actually was.
Well,
it's not actually in that much danger.
When like writing up these proposals, you want people to believe that
Correct.
preserving these areas is crucial.
Yeah, it's a $2 billion industry. You could get access to a lot of fucking money by unsuspecting individuals and certainly
Billionaires.
greenwashing billionaires and corporations like, oh yeah, okay, I'll just toss some fucking tax write-off money over there. They seem like they're in crisis.
To not do anything.
To not do anything. To not reduce their own emissions at all. In fact, to often give them permission to go over caps on emissions and exceed the carbon emissions that they're legally supposed to be doing because they're offsetting by buying these credits that are doing nothing. Yeah. Gucci, Salesforce, BHP, Shell, EasyJet, Leon, the band Pearl Jam, God bless them. We're all among dozens of companies and organizations that have bought rainforest offsets approved by Vera for environmental claims. Human rights issues are a serious concern, and at least one that they flag of the offsetting projects. The Guardian visited a flagship reforestation project in Peru and was shown videos of residents that showed their homes being demolished, cut apart with chainsaws and ropes by park guards and police.
What?
They spoke of forced evictions and tensions with park authorities. So like some of these big corpo carbon offset projects are displacing populations in parts of the world who are already living on, maintaining, farming, stewarding the fucking land and kicking them out so they can plant trees, which like...
So they can plant trees.
Yeah.
Dude, it's not about the pasta.
It's not about the pasta. This was featured on the Last Week Tonight episode. This happened in a region of Uganda that was marked for reforestation, evicting thousands of residents who had been on that land for generations.
Oh my
farming on
God.
it, made thousands of people homeless, and they were not allowed to even. He played a clip. This was like a Swedish carbon offset company, and there was an investigative news story that uncovered that this had happened. And they interviewed one of the landowners who had been displaced, and they asked, like, okay, well, can you show me where like that land that you used to live on was? And they were like, no, we can't even go near it. Like it's like they'll, like, I think under threat of like violence, they couldn't even go near it. And then after this news story broke, then this Swedish company was like, oh shoot, okay, we'll walk this back. But like they knew this was happening when they were doing it. They were just embarrassed because people found out about it. Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that fucking crazy?
I mean, I would love to say
that you're shocked.
That I'm shocked.
Yeah.
And I'm so not, because we started this episode at the top talking about how human greed is going to overcome everything.
1000%.
The existence of humanity.
Mm-hmm. So the two studies from the international group of researchers found just 8 out of 29 Vera-approved projects were where further analysis was possible. So there wasn't even further analysis possible on the majority of the projects because there's like no fucking oversight. So they can't even just
hidden.
Yeah, they can't even just hand you the stats on like whether or not these are even reducing carbon emissions. But they were able to identify or get the hard scientific stats on 29 of these projects, and only 8 of them showed evidence of meaningful deforestation reductions. And remember, they've signed off on and certified like 1,500 of these projects. 29 of them had statistics available that were like actually credible for analysis or enough for analysis, and only 8 of them were found to be effective. The journalists were able to do further analysis on those projects, comparing the estimates made by the offsetting projects with the results obtained by the scientists. The analysis indicated that about 94% of the credits the projects produced should not have been approved. Credits from 21 projects had no climate benefit whatsoever. Of these 29 that had any stats, 7 had between 98% and 52% fewer than claimed benefits using Vera's system.
So we go from 0, well, I guess 100% fewer claims to 98%. That's a whole different category. It's almost the same thing. Whoa.
And 1 had 80% more climate impact, according to this investigation.
Cool.
And again, that's only one of the ones they were able to get enough actual tangible data on. So it's definitely way more than that. It's because we don't have the data to analyze the other 1,000+ projects.
It's actual money laundering.
It's money laundering. So what we're seeing in a lot of cases are corporations with deep pockets buying offsets to basically give them a tax write-off and carte blanche to pollute by paying to allegedly reduce pollution elsewhere. And while some of these offset programs can indeed have a positive impact, like I would say if you are out there trying to find somewhere that you could invest, looking for something like wind farms and going deep to make sure that they have commitment to replacement of fossil fuel or coal energy sources.
And it's not just a widget you can add to your payment page.
Yeah. But like reforestation has become kind of a scam. And that's not to say that we shouldn't invest in it, because we should. But
it's about a lot more than just and it's planting fucking trees.
Yes, and it's packaged as this whole like, well, trees eat CO2. So like we just got to plant more trees and then that we're good. That fixes everything. You know, 1 like equals 1 tree. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. The real issue that needs to be addressed to have any lasting positive outcome is in reduction or, God willing, elimination of the emissions that these companies are paying to offset. So I know this feels really hopeless, but like this is another call to action to, as Lucy said, vote with your dollars, hold government officials, corporations, like hold them accountable, follow, support, and join climate activists who are working to hold corporations accountable for their environmental crimes. And just to urge you not to be lulled into a false sense of complacency by any big business that claims carbon neutrality. Like a lot of businesses say this, and it's not true. The only way to secure that kind of claim is for them to mitigate their own emissions in-house, not by dumping money into a BS program and greenwashing their ads to get you to buy more of their shit and create even more carbon emissions that then they can just offset by buying more of this shit.
It's
crazy.
And now that I'm thinking about it, like more and more, I see those little check boxes. Offset your carbon emissions for 21 cents.
They were doing it at the gas stations.
Yes.
Like they do it everywhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can do whatever you want with your money, but if you care about the climate, that's not the shit that's gonna fix it. So like, don't put your money there. Please don't put your fucking money there. Like carbon offsets are a fucking scam.
And I think we've talked a lot about like things that any individual can do to help with climate change, being pro-environmentalist. We talked about going vegetarian or vegan, which neither of us are currently willing to do. Limiting your air travel, which I'm not currently in the space to do.
I mean, we don't fly that often.
Composting, having an electric car.
Even small
recycling.
Things, like, again, a lot of this depends on the accessibility in your community. But like...
Or having no car.
But if you can, even a couple times a week, walk or bike to run a specific errand rather than driving. Like the other day, I was going to the weed store and I walked out front and I looked at my car and part of me was like, I really just want to drive. But it's literally 2 blocks away. So I just chose to walk. Like those are, and I'm not patting myself on the back for fucking walking 2 blocks. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you can incorporate things like that into your regular routine, I do a lot of my grocery shopping at a grocery co-op. And now in Minneapolis, they charge you if you get a bag at the store, like even a paper or a plastic bag. And like the co-op doesn't even offer plastic bags. But bringing your own reusable bag to the grocery store, things like that, like they're small. It's not going to solve the climate crisis, but that's part of voting with your dollars. If we're not consistently, as I drink out of my single-use plastic cup that I will rinse and recycle, but if we're not consistently buying these things, then it reduces the market for those things. So yeah, I mean, those are small things you can do on your own. But honestly, like getting involved in some level of climate activism, there are organizations in literally every state, every community that you live in, that you can't do it by yourself. So this is one of the ways that you can find a like-minded community with similar goals and work together to really send strong messages to corporations. And yeah, it's like, do the research on where you're buying everything, your food. And there are apps for shit like that. Like that's one of the ways that technology has made things in a lot of ways really easy. Like there are apps for places to boycott. There are apps for Black-owned businesses to shop from. There are apps for, you know, effective or at least like better climate options in our day-to-day products and our day-to-day activities. So we can, as individuals, make those investments in our own routines and our own lives to help. But until we work together more as a collective, which includes voting for people that are actually going to, at a federal level, hold corporations like this accountable, all of those are actions that we can take to help mitigate the climate crisis.
Yeah, and if you're like me and you kind of want to see it broken down on a psychological, scientific brain level, like I said, these 7 Dragons of Inaction, that really kind of helped me parse out, like, what are my psychological obstacles?
Yeah, what are my dragons?
What are your dragons?
Slay those dragons.
What's making you drag, baby?
And we all have them.
I am an avid recycler, and yet I will not think twice about ordering a steak. And that is some cognitive dissonance in my own mind that I want to work on. But yeah, there are steps, however big or however small, whatever you feel comfortable with. But I also challenge you to challenge yourself, kind of pushing outside those boundaries and thinking about, again, connecting the dots, like how your actions and behaviors affect your neighbors, your community, and the world at large, because it is so much more interconnected than I think we think.
Oh, yeah.
It is. So,
well, because white supremacy wants us to parse out all of these things so that we can ignore that interconnectedness.
So we can excuse our behaviors.
But at the end of the day, it hurts all of us.
Yep.
So it does affect you, even if you don't feel it right now in this moment. So hope you're enjoying your car ride as you listen to this podcast. You douche.
Hey, it's not all black and white.
I drove to Home Depot for nothing today. For nothing. And then expanded my trip by going to Caribou. So we're all guilty.
If everyone can kind of understand, accept, acknowledge, and then do their part, we will be in a much better place.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was environmental crimes.
Wow, what a doozy
of which
an
we
episode.
are all complicit.
Yeah. Tag yourselves.
Thank you so much for listening, and hope we didn't depress you too much. We will see you next week.
Bye-bye.